The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Love news but find keeping up a bit overwhelming? Well, Newsable is the answer. It's your daily fix of everything worth talking about. I'm your host, Imogen Wells, and in about 15 minutes, I'll bring you what you need to know from Aotearoa and around the world and explain why it matters. Newsable tackles the big stuff without taking itself too seriously. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
A big theme in the world of business and economics this year that I struggle to understand, yet is proven over and over again, is that in the middle of a construction boom, companies in the sector are going bust, left, right and centre, and no one is said to be making any money. Which, when you look at supply and demand, and also things like the massive cost of materials we have here, and the odd duopolistic setup for supply, it's just bananas. Well, one figure in the industry, who is founder CEO of a procurement and bidding consultancy, and so knows the business from both the pitch for and commission project sides of the fence, has a few ideas that he has been sharing as to what might be off in this particular soup. His name is Warner Cowin, an ex-RNZAF engineering officer who's taken many of the disciplines and skills from military life, a place so influential on business team structure, accountability culture, and systemisation, and has used those to help build his successful 15-person consultancy. To talk construction, things learnt in the services, and empowering Māori and Pacific business through clever delivery of big projects, Warner joins the podcast now. Kia ora, thank you for joining us.
Kia ora, Simon.
Hey, so tell me first up, Warner, what got you into military life?
I was, as a kid, really interested in aviation, and I was a Top Gun kid. I always loved the movie, and I was always interested in airplanes. And so, as a young person, I was that's what I wanted to do. And worked towards that through school, and wanted to be a pilot, and actually got knocked back in my final year of school, and that was a bit of a blow. But I just had to pick myself up, and decided to go to engineering school and become an engineer, mechanical engineer at that point in time. And in my third year at university, got picked up by the RNZAF as an engineering officer. So completed my studies and then joined the military that way. Ironically, had the opportunity to tick the pilot box in my third year, but I'd actually kind of fallen in love with the concept of being an engineer at that point in time.
And what was it about the RNZAF that appealed to you as a third year, as a student at university? Engineering students are known for having a good time, maybe not the fully disciplined life of the military.
Well, interestingly, I don't know. I think the excitement of the opportunity, the chance to work with some pretty high tech equipment, chance to travel. So I was always curious about those sort of things, and the Air Force for me didn't disappoint. I was in there nearly 7 years, and I think I probably lived in 3 countries over that period of time where I did. Had lots of different experiences, worked on lots of different things, and met some great people. My final tour was in 2001 as a UN peacekeeper in East Timor, and that was quite a defining moment for me. I think it really re-indexed or indexed me around, the how lucky we are to live here and the opportunities that are available in New Zealand or in most parts of the Western world. So, when things are going down, I always kind of look back at that and go, things aren't really that bad. And I think that was a defining moment for me. I ticked a number of boxes when I was in the service. I learned some really interesting skills, and the great thing about the military and is what opportunities it gives young people for leadership positions at all ranks. The importance of good communication, living by your values. It's a very values-driven organisation. So, you kind of meet a military person and they behave and act in a certain way, and that if you interact with them, there's going to be sort of a same outcome, and it's partly process-driven, but a lot values-driven. So that kind of set a little template for me in my mind around values and importance of process, and having ventured into the corporate world where sometimes values are a little bit ropey and probably more financially driven. I kind of got sort of slightly disillusioned around values, but have been very big advocate around bringing them back into our business. So, yeah.
And when you mentioned there that, the military is a big organisation, that's a really great word, isn't it? Because being organised and having things systemised and in process and thinking through every step of the journey and making sure that it's all reliable and the same every time and planning ahead of time, all these things that are really the essence of organisation, they're what the military does so well, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. I think people naturally think that the military lacks flexibility. It's very, hierarchical. It is. It does have those elements to it. But, it's massively flexible, and it's flexible around its process. It can pick up a squadron of helicopters, which is what I was on, and can operate those in New Zealand and pick them up and put them in East Timor, put them in Bougainville, deploy them on the back of a ship to support humanitarian aid in the South Pacific. That's a hugely flexible organisation. It has processes that work and are flexible. I think one thing that's really interesting about the Air Force and the military in general is you can't recruit people off the street to do the job. You have to grow the talent from in. So the process of selection of people is quite key to the success of the military. They look at fundamental competencies, but generally looking at the values and the personality of the person, and they grow their own competency. So it's a really unique concept.
Yeah, let's jump into that a bit because, in one way they do just recruit people off the street, don't they? But they don't recruit them to do the job that they end up doing. They don't recruit a military pilot or a senior engineer ready to go.
No, they don't. And I think what's interesting about it is they spend a lot of time and money investing in the recruitment process. So they're, looking for those core competencies and values. But what's really important is how they induct them into the organisation. So reinforcing those values and certain behaviours through things like recruit courses or boot camps, officer training. So you come sort of, after that, you come sort of programmed to behave and act in a particular way. And then you go on to generally your core technical training, which is obviously highly technical focused or whatever you choose to do. And you get taught things like, how to communicate to each other. And how to accept criticism. I think what's really interesting in the military is that you're constantly in critique after each mission or after each exercise. People will give you feedback, and it won't necessarily be nice. But that's the sign, I think, of a very mature organisation in which you can express and be honest about someone's performance. And I think what's interesting is when I joined the civilian world, people were less likely to share bad news with you. But the question is, how do you improve? How do you know how to get better? And I think that's what the military does, is that you just get used to it. It's not personal. It's just the way it is. We have a saying that, if you were average, you were told you were shit. If you're an exceptional, you're told you're average. You never become exceptional. It's just the way it is. And you learn to compartmentalize. You learn to get over things pretty quickly, because in situations you've got to kind of deal with the facts that you've got, make a decision, and it's really important about making decisions. The worst thing you can do is be indecisive in front of your teams, and especially your troops. So you gather the facts, you use them to help make the decision, you make the decision. If it's the wrong decision, just gather the troops again, remake a decision and make it quick, make it fast, learn from your mistakes, but get over that mistake real quick.
You talk there about the values as well that are instilled in you and how you've been interested. We'll jump into the business that you're into now in a second. But I think that's really interesting, that idea that you're kind of programmed with values. What are those kind of essential values of the military? Because people who don't have an understanding of the services or experience there may look at it as being maybe robotic when you say something like programmed. But really what you're talking about are some values that really are about the most human elements.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think, if you look before someone joins the military and in general, those people that play a lot of team sports, where they're used to looking after their friends, realize that it's bigger than them as an individual. Those are the type of core values that the military fosters and encourages. I would say that most people are really hard programmed with values. You're really, in some regards, this is my personal opinion, you're either good for the military or not so good for the military. And those people that are involved in team sports, or involved in things like drama, which involve other people or whatever, have high levels of empathy, good listeners, compassionate and care about other people, prepared to be sort of vulnerable and brave to raise questions. Those are the kind of core values that are great in a military environment. And in some regards, I think they're good values for me when I look for people within my business. And, those are the kind of things that I look for, your ability to work as a team. We've got a bit of a, one of our core values in our business is no dickheads. So we believe that the best thing you can do is look after yourself and your mates. That's first and foremost. And if a client is not sort of aligning with our values as well, we think that's detrimental to our team. And we've actually, fired clients on the basis of that not being aligned with what we...
Did you fire them by saying, look, one of our values is no dickheads, and...
Yeah. It was just a matter of them calling, trying to get us to do work, and I, they just stopped calling. It's happened a couple of times. But your people are really precious, and they're the most important commodity, or not, that's terrible we did use. They're the most important thing that we have in our business. And so if we don't take active measures to look after each other, then I'll lose them. So it's really important for me. So the experiences they have with each other, the culture we create within our business, and the people we work with are really important to fostering that. And it has to be it doesn't have to be amazing. There's days when it's not, but, we have to have some amazing experiences, and happiness and fun are a key part of what we do as well.
So, let's follow that journey to get into that business. And so it was really interesting hearing those words like empathy and vulnerability as kind of key attributes for good members of the military, which is not always how the stereotypes around the military might be. And also that idea about a really positive culture, which again, people may think that the culture is aggressive or kind of bossy, or it's quite interesting that that's the lived experience. What was the thing there that kind of after having served in the military, what led you to look to kind of move into the corporate world?
I think my time in Timor, I kind of realised that actually there was a bigger world out there. And the great thing about the military is they kind of can organise your life for the next 10 years of it and define where you go. And I had basically the next sort of 8 years of my life sort of plotted out. And so I just thought, gee whiz, I really do want to go and have a look at the world. And I resigned, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And literally, I jumped on a plane and spent the next 7 years sort of traveling, really. We lived in UK. Me and my wife lived in Japan. We spent some time in China where my mum was living at the time. So I just bounced around the world. And, if I look at my time in the military, my time traveling, I really didn't have a real job till I was about 32. So just kind of hauled all these experiences, and I kind of fell into construction management in the UK, which is really fortunate. I think, the power of an OE is really defining in terms of giving you opportunities that you just wouldn't necessarily get. And so I just put my hand up for everything. If I could handle looking after troops in the field and maintaining helicopters and so forth, I thought, well, pouring concrete can't be that hard. And so that's what I got into. I ended up doing really well in London, running big construction jobs. And then I joined the corporate world when I came back here in New Zealand, joined Downer. And that was a really good experience. Had 5 years there. And then I kind of, at that point, realized I probably wasn't really cut out for corporate world. I wasn't a political player. I'm not saying Downers is political, but I think you've got to have a certain sort of characteristics that allow you to sort of climb the corporate ladder. And I knew that the only person that could fulfill my aspirations and desires was more than likely myself. And that's the reason why I probably started Height. Well, it was 6 years ago now.
And Height started with quite an interesting consultancy model. Tell us a little bit about like what the gap was you saw that led you to set up Height into the kind of building, construction, infrastructure kind of area.
Yeah, look, I initially started the business to manage construction jobs, to outsource project management for construction, and I think in professional services, what I've learned from my experience is that you kind of almost have to get really super niche if you're going to own a space in the market. And so I did that for a year or two, was running jobs for clients, and essentially what I came as back as an FTE but on contract. And I think that was a real challenge for me. I had desired to have flexibility of time and a whole variety of different clients. And what I found was that what I was really, really good at was helping clients win tenders or win big deals with government contracts. And I was really, really good at designing procurement models. And kind of weirdly, I decided that would be my niche and worked really hard to define that niche. And to a point now where, we're from our professional services space where we're selling time, a couple of years ago, we made a really clear distinction that we would go to a product-based business. So we started to realize that in a world of disruption, that selling time had limited value. So we started looking at products, and that's what we've been doing. We focused on selling products and experiences for clients in those spaces.
And when you say products, are those things like workshops and training modules where I see from the website there are things like people can get their company along to learn about the best way to set pricing in their business to make sure they're not leaving value on the table or pricing themselves out of jobs. And there's a bunch of those, aren't there, that are kind of courses that you can just roll out on demand?
Yeah, I mean, what we did was we were really fortunate. We got a business coach in quite early in the business, and that really helped define for us the things we needed to work on. But one thing he did was really powerful was to define our core customer, if you're familiar with that term. So essentially, where are we best to play? Where do we get the best recurring revenues from, make the most margin, and have the best experiences? And at that time, we were trying to be everything to everybody. We were working across multiple sectors. And it was kind of like a sort of eureka moment that actually our core customer sat in construction infrastructure. We defined that person and what were the key problems and issues they were having. And it worked out really quickly when we started workshopping it, is that we were providing experiences again and again that were similar for these core customers, and that we could define 6 or 7 products that we could continue to roll out. And the benefit of that is that it really helps us to standardize the approach. So from a marketing perspective, it's very clear. We just don't sell time. Here's a solution for you. It's ready made. From a training perspective, in terms of staff, we can train them on the products so they can replicate that. So from a quality perspective, it's a really powerful thing to do. It also means that, from the things that we do, they're very strategic, they're very interesting. We don't get sort of stuck in some of the sort of drudgery of things. And the next stage for us now is, once we define our product, is how do we digitize it, how to create a digital experience around it. So it's been a very progressive journey over the last sort of 5 or 6 years around defining who we are.
And from getting that time and experience where you're in on both sides of the deal in big infrastructure processes. So when we talk about procurement, that's when, say a massive project needs to be done and they need to find all the parts for it. And when you talk about bid, that's if you're one of the people looking to be a part. So with that kind of, what's involved with being on both sides of the fence? Because it's quite a small industry in a way, isn't it? Or there's not that many big projects and that many big players.
Yeah, Simon, that's a good question. I mean, because we do work both in New Zealand and Australia, so we started exporting quite early on, and because the construction industry, in particular, the contractors, it's an Australasian market. So we work both sides of the Tasman. So the story of how we got into procurement is quite an interesting one, because we were in the bid side predominantly initially, and the same types of skills that are required to understand how to put a good proposal together in terms of managing risk and pricing, construction phasing, all those things are really key, and they were actually really seriously lacking in the procurement side. So one of our bid clients actually introduced us to one of their procurement customers, and that was the start of our procurement business, because they could see real benefit in some of the tools that we provided that could help them to define a solution before they put to the market, or even look at different ways of procuring. In the situation you mentioned in the segue around why are people losing money in a booming market, it comes down to a number of things, but, contractors generally have a good inherent understanding of cost and risk. And client organisations have different pressures. So, how do you instill the same discipline in a buying agency than you do as a senior or a large contractor? So that's how we got into into procurement. And it's been really good for us as well, because procurement is hugely important in the infrastructure space, because it can significantly influence the outcome. And I think a lot of client organisations are realising now is they can't outsource the risk. And that's what's happened in our industry at the moment, is that some client organisations are better prepared to handle risk. What's a good example? So just trying to think. So when you dig a hole, sometimes you might find something in the hole you can't deal with. It could be what we call ground conditions. Sounds pretty boring. But a contractor may never know that, and the client might put the risk on that. And so they either inflate the price or keep it skinny. And either way, the client loses if they don't find the ground condition because they pay more, or the contractor loses if they don't make allowances for. So who's better to handle that risk? In some cases, the client is. So I think we've had a very outsourced risk model, which hasn't helped our construction industry at all, sadly.
Yeah, and that kind of to jump into that kind of where the risk lives and how that is changing the industry. I mean, that is kind of the key factor, isn't it? And some really big, well-known cases of that might be overruns on costs of like convention centres, where we've found very big companies going, who really are very good at what they do, going a long way backwards. And as a taxpayer, where the taxpayer is paying for it, you go, oh, that's good. At least the taxpayer's not saddled with hundreds of millions of dollars of overruns. But actually, if the private sector is saddled with those hundreds of millions, it's the small contractors who eat it, and there's not the viability of the whole sector.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting points there. If we look pre-GFC, there was a bit of activity, but the amount of work's going on in the market at the moment is unprecedented in terms of work. And part of the challenge we've had around as an industry is this hasn't been enough good capability and skills and expertise to help price those type of jobs, run those types of jobs. So that's been, I think, a key part of the reason why a lot of these jobs are failing for big contractors, coupled with a lack of good process around how they manage risk and governance of things, how they sign things off, and also a little bit of probably win-at-all-cost model. It's slightly alpha male, the construction industry. They're pretty... there's girls and guys, but pretty tough, burly, competitive people. And winning a tender can be win at all costs sort of model. So there can be that kind of absolute need and desire to want to win, and then we'll sort the detail out later. So there's a kind of a mixture of a cultural and capability and sort of process related. What else did you mention there?
Oh, and when you've then had things like, especially with public public procurement models, when they've been mandated to go with lowest prices in some cases.
So it's a really interesting question. I mean, it's very easy to justify lowest price, but from our experiences, the majority of contracts never on a lowest price model. Lowest price basis never deliver on time or to budget. Things will always cost what they cost. But it's a broader question around value. So what's important to the client and how do you value it? Cost is obviously important, but delivery to time and quality equally as important as well. So let's say we're building a road outside your children's school. Safety has to be a really key consideration. Your ability to drop your kids off in the morning, your ability for the kids not to wander on site, those are key considerations as well. And I would argue in some cases, if we look at a lowest price conforming model, you will get what you pay for, and it may come at the expense of that type of amenity or safety.
It's like that great, the old classic. You can have it fast, cheap, or quick. No, fast, cheap, or good.
Yeah,
but you can't. Pick two of three. There's no way.
But I think where the government at the moment, we were down in Wellington talking about what we call social procurement. So how do you affect a wider social outcome through delivery? So if some of our clients have huge amounts of money to spend, one of our clients has over $42 billion to spend over the next 23 years, and their ability to affect social change through that by encouraging their contractors and rewarding them accordingly to take on apprentices or support Māori business or Pacifica business or woman-owned businesses, to invest in training and systems and processes to create future primes. And actually what you'll find is when you look at some of the larger contractors, they do it anyway. But they get penalised on that if it becomes a lowest price conforming model. So they're not actively encouraged in this current time to actually invest in that type of stuff. But they do it out of a matter of need, fundamentally, because they're short of people on the ground, so they have to grow talent. And they need the strong subcontractors to support their business as well. So the subcontractors are important because they manage the peaks and troughs for the core contractor, if that makes sense.
And that capability building, especially with public projects, it should be a key idea to grow what's good in the country, which is a larger sector, a more healthy, competitive sector as well by having more players, and just always going for the people that can do everything. That leads to the kind of concentration that you get to the point where we had a couple of very big companies fall over in the last couple of years, which, truly threatened the viability of a whole sector.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a key issue around, is particularly construction sector, is the amount of diversity within the market. There's a couple of real dominant big contractors, and rightly or wrongly, they do dominate the market. They're the ones who win the majority of the work. And what procurement does is it provides an opportunity to say, well, actually, how do we put things to market now? If we put these large big contracts together, what opportunity does it create for smaller business or improving the market diversity? So I think it's a real challenge, particularly for councils and other government agencies. But, there's some really good people thinking about this now. And what that might mean is that, there could be active encouragement for the primes to grow, or the large contractor to grow more diversity in their supply chain. Or there could be smaller contracts that are carved out of that and given to small businesses. I'll give you a really good example. We've been working in Fiji, and it's a road maintenance contract. It's been dominated by a number of large Australasian contractors, and there's 4 key subcontractors on the island. And the intent of the ADB contract is that those 4 subcontractors will be the primes in 10 years' time. So the contractors incentivized to building their capability and skills to a point where they'll bid outright. So, there's ways and means of thinking about this and just doing things a little differently.
That idea of, taking a really thoughtful approach to help grow those small businesses, that's something that's really personal to you as well in your own journey, isn't it? Because you're involved in EO, the Entrepreneurs Organisation, at both ends of the scale with helping small businesses and also kind of learning from other large and established businesses.
Yeah, I think, a lot of those businesses aren't necessarily doing work with government organisations. It's probably a different topic, but, doing business with government is a really great opportunity. There, as a business, as clients, they never go bust. Or we hope they would never go bust. They generally pay on time, and the types of people in government organisations are generally pretty good. They care about what they do. So, creating opportunities for smaller businesses to participate in that business opportunity, I think is huge. And also, I think in New Zealand, roughly all construction infrastructure, 27% of the market is dictated by government and central and local government. So they have particular influence over the market. So if they can, instill a sense of, what is an expected level of health and safety or participation of small suppliers, that then by nature filters through to other parts of the private sector as well. Because buying or selling organisations will naturally default to a government organisation if they get rewarded to invest in their people and their supply chain.
Yeah, and do tell me a bit about on that other topic, the idea of networks and how EO and mentoring is part of what you do.
Yeah, look, if I think about the success we've had as a business, it started in a garage 6 years ago. Me and my wife, and we're a team of 15 now. We've got a small satellite office in Brisbane. We based here in Auckland. One of the real important things that's helped my business grow is being involved in EO. And I went through the Accelerator program, which is a program designed to support early stage entrepreneurs to scale their business. So that's less than $1 million US is what we call an early stage entrepreneur. And the foundation of that is a thing called Forum, which is essentially a place where you come together with other entrepreneurs and you share updates on your business, your personal life, and your family life. And the core premise being that all three of those things must be in balance for you to have a fruitful and happy life. And as entrepreneurs, naturally we default and we get very focused on our business sometimes at the expense of our personal lives and also our family lives. So the key concept is you share what's going well and what's not going so well. It really forces you to be vulnerable and be honest in front of a group of people. And one of the key challenges, I think, especially for entrepreneurs, is loneliness. There's things you don't necessarily want to share with your partner or your wife or husband, or you can share with your work colleagues, because it can be very lonely. There's things that might be going through your head. It could be cash flow or difficult people. So that place allows you a safe place each month to express concerns and share how you're feeling, and it's hugely powerful. I think it's been really crucial for me in terms of the way I've scaled my business. Like I had no real desire to do anything, but just kind of run construction jobs. But being inspired by these other people who are trying to grow global businesses, that was like, wow, could I do that? And it made me think about things differently and gave me a broader perspective, allowed me to really think about what different things I could bring to the business, and, made me a better leader and a better manager as well. So, yeah, hugely inspirational.
And then you're doing kind of the same journey for others by getting involved in the early stage part of the EO with companies like you were.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge privilege, So I'm the chair of the Accelerator program here in New Zealand. So at the moment, we've got about 12 early stage entrepreneurs who are going through the program. And, I kind of listen to their stories. So, part of that, share what's going well, what's not going so well. And I think as you progress through your own business, I find myself listening and going, actually, I've got that problem as well. And so, there's a huge amount of learning through giving, if that makes sense. So, just spending time with these people trying to share experiences, because that's what it's about. It's about sharing experiences. It's not telling someone what to do, but, you might have a problem for a staff member, for example, and they go, well, I can remember this time when I had a problem, but if you bring it context and share experiences, that's really powerful. So, yeah, I've got a huge amount out of that. I do mentoring for a number of small Māori and Pacifica businesses in the construction space. And that's been huge as well. And we've been doing a little bit of work with veterans out of the NZDF, so helping them try and look at starting a business as an option. It's not a natural default position for someone who's come out of the military. They tend to look at going to a corporate environment that kind of provides sort of structure. So getting them thinking about that. And even if they don't do it, straight out of the military, then possibly they could think about it in the future.
What advice, you must be asked a lot for advice by people who are looking to make that move from being in a really structured environment, whether it's a corporate or whether it's the services. What advice do you give people thinking about starting out?
I think it's really important to be passionate about what you do. It has to be, you have to care deeply. I've worked with some entrepreneurs whose focus was making money. And I think, you'll have limited success. You've got to care deeply about what you do to a point where you think about it all the time, and it becomes almost obsessive. And if you're thinking it like that, you're trying to be the best. You're trying to be the best. You're trying to go, actually, how do I make this better? How do I make this better? And the motivation is not necessarily driven by money, but by kind of like, you're passionate about, you care about something. And for me, I'm really fortunate. I really care about and interested about how do we affect social change through procurement. How do we help a small contractor who's only doing $20 million to grow to a $50 million business within the next 2 years? I find that really exciting and interesting. So I think about it the whole time. So I think, starting with something you're really passionate about. I mean, if you were to look at the economics of starting a winery, you'd never do it. And, I've got friends who started a winery because they care about it. They're really interested. And I think that's awesome. To spend 7 days a week in the vineyard, not my bag. But, it's pure passion, Yeah.
Do you have any words you live by?
Not really. I suppose, I look at I kind of look at our values and sort of think they speak for us a little bit. We have something called challenge the norm. It's around making sure that you just don't assume a solution straight away. That you really take time to understand the problem, and the benefit we have is that we do work across multiple sectors and all across the world, and what different thinking can we bring? I'm just not into teamwork. I'm big on teamwork and no dickheads. I think life's too short to surround yourself with people that you don't enjoy hanging out with. Deliver on promises. Just if you say you're going to do something, just do it. We call that do good shit. And I think honesty and integrity are really important as well. And those are our 4 core values. That's what we live by. We talk about them lots. We value stories at work. We recruit on the basis of values as well. So those are really important to us. It's an important part of our DNA, hugely important.
And as a final thought, like having, had really kind of meaningful impact across a couple of different areas now. Like, how do you define success? What's your personal kind of idea of success and your business idea of success?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I should speak to my wife about this morning. We can put metrics around things, particularly in a business sense, so budgets and NPS and stuff like that. But I think for us, for me personally, it's about how well our team perform and what sort of amazing change we make for a client. That for me is a huge story. So some of the work we're doing in social procurement at the moment, one of my team members, Cal, was down in Wellington presenting to the Mayoral Forum on Friday and to a minister on Friday afternoon, or one of the ministries there. And it was huge. I went down and watched him speak, and it was just like, wow, this is cool. How does a little business in Auckland with a bunch of 15 people, do this? That's pretty cool. And the same with some of the deals we're working on. We might be working in, Singapore or Myanmar, with some of our Australian clients, in particular in Mexico City. And I sit there and go, wow, this little business. And we had a really crappy office. I'll tell you a story really quickly. We had a really crappy office previously, and we would have this sort of outward perception through our website and how we operated in our client, and people thought, wow, we must be some massive office, but we had this really crappy office in Sandringham that we were based out of. So I'm always impressed when people come and they go, oh wow, this is kind of like, you're quite small. Yeah. Family success is an interesting one. I think, as entrepreneurs, it's trying to get the balance right. And I think it's something I really try and work on. So, this year I went away for 2.5 weeks. I switched my phone off, no emails, no calls. My guys had my wife's number if they needed to call me. So it's kind of like trying to be 100% present. I've got a young family as well. And I'll try and replicate the same for Christmas as well. Just had the phone off. And, just being present, I think, is really important, and 100% focused. And trying to keep my mind on them as opposed to, what opportunities are bouncing around in the future.
Hey, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and telling us your story. That's Warner Cowin, the CEO, founder at Height. Thank you for joining us.
Kia ora, Simon. Take care.
Kia ora. And thank you very much to Tina Tiller for producing, and thank you very much for having us along and listening this year on the podcast. We'll be having a break for a couple of weeks and coming back in early January. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound, and brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.